We paid people $1,000 to tell us their horror stories. In a world filled with spine-chilling tales, we decided to uncover the scariest, most heart-stopping horror stories people have ever experienced. To do this, we offered $1,000 to anyone willing to share their terrifying encounters. The response was overwhelming. From haunted houses and ghostly apparitions to inexplicable disappearances and eerie premonitions, the stories we received were nothing short of terrifying. Here are the most haunting tales that emerged from our experiment. The haunted farmhouse. Martha's tale began with an old farmhouse inherited from her grandparents. The house, isolated and surrounded by dense woods, was rumored to be haunted. From the moment Martha moved in, she felt an uneasy presence. Doors creaked open on their own, shadows flickered in the corner of her vision, and whispers echoed through the empty halls. One night as she lay in bed, she felt a cold hand brush against her face. Paralyzed with fear, she opened her eyes to see a ghostly figure of a woman standing by her bed. The apparition whispered, "Leave this place," before vanishing into thin air. Martha fled the house that night and never returned. The disappearing roommate. David's story was a chilling account of his college years. He and his roommate Mike lived in a small off-campus apartment. And one evening, Mike didn't return from his part-time job. David wasn't worried at first, thinking Mike had stayed out late with friends. But days turned into weeks, and there was still no sign of Mike. David reported his roommate's disappearance to the police, but they found no clues. Then, one night, David heard a faint knocking from inside Mike's bedroom. Gathering his courage, he opened the door to find the room exactly as it had been left, but with one eerie addition: Mike's wallet and keys neatly placed on the bed. Mike was never found, and David moved out immediately, haunted by the mystery of his friend's disappearance, the cursed doll. Emily's story involved a porcelain doll she found at an antique shop. The doll, with its lifelike eyes and intricate dress, seemed to call out to her. She brought it home, and that's when the nightmares began. Every night, Emily dreamt of the doll coming to life, whispering sinister things in her ear. One morning, she woke to find the doll moved from its usual spot. She shrugged it off, thinking she must have moved it herself. But when she found the doll in her bed, staring at her with its unblinking eyes, she knew something was terribly wrong. Emily tried to get rid of the doll, but it always found its way back to her home. Desperate, she finally buried it deep in the woods, hoping to never see it again. But the nightmares persisted, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the doll was still watching her the vanishing house. Tom shared a bizarre experience he had while driving through a rural area late at night. Lost and needing directions, he stopped at a house with its lights on. An elderly woman answered the door and kindly gave him directions. Grateful, Tom drove off, but realized he had left his wallet behind. He turned back, but when he reached the spot where the house stood, it was gone. In its place was an overgrown lot with no signs of habitation. Tom later learned from locals that the house had burned down decades ago, and the woman he spoke to was believed to have perished in the fire. The Phantom Hitchhiker. Lisa's story was a classic urban legend come to life. Driving home from a late-night party, she saw a young man hitchhiking by the side of the road. Feeling sorry for him, she offered him a ride. The man was quiet and seemed grateful. He asked to be dropped off at an old house on the outskirts of town. When Lisa arrived, the man got out and thanked her. As she drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw that the house was dark and looked abandoned. Curious, she stopped at a gas station to ask about the house. The attendant told her the house had been empty for years, ever since a young man living there died in a car accident on that very road. Chilled to the bone, Lisa realized she had given a ride to a ghost. The shadow in the mirror. Jessica's story involved a mysterious shadow that appeared in her bathroom mirror. It started as a faint outline but grew clearer each day. The shadow resembled a man with no discernible features. Whenever Jessica tried to touch the mirror, the shadow would vanish, only to reappear moments later. One night, while brushing her teeth, the shadow suddenly lunged at her, pressing its hands against the glass as if trying to break through. Jessica screamed and ran out of the bathroom. She avoided mirrors for weeks, but the shadow continued to haunt her dreams. Desperate, she covered all the mirrors in her house, but she couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, the unseen stalker. Michael's tale was a psychological horror that left us all on edge. He lived in a small apart,